A Stryker cavalry troop, callsign COWBOY, is tasked with conducting reconnaissance in force through a mountain pass. Intelligence indicates the presence of an OPFOR combined arms company in the valley beyond. AH-64D CROW 4-1 is assigned to screen friendly movements and provide additional firepower. Welcome aboard my AH-64D Apache for a little homebrewed mission that I've cooked up. I've been wanting to feature the Apache for quite a long time, actually, but only recently have I actually gotten good enough at flying it for that not to be a profoundly embarrassing display. So, let's get into the air, and I'll explain a little bit more about the mission en route. I'll just go direct to my first waypoint here, and I'll release the brakes, and we will lift off very gingerly. Light on the wheels. Up we go. To a fairly stable hover. And we'll start the transition to forward flight and try not to trim anyone's antennas off in the process. Alright, look over the symbology. And once we're nice and trimmed, I'll get to explaining. Alright, that looks okay. So, as was partially enumerated in the pre-mission briefing, the mission for today is to conduct armed reconnaissance in support of a Stryker cavalry unit, which is also conducting armed reconnaissance through a mountain pass. Basically, then, our objective is to fight our way through OPFOR's screening forces and locate their main line of resistance. In terms of execution, well, we really need to take the threat into account. We're dealing with a capable mechanized combined arms force that we can expect to throw automatic cannon, tank cannon, ATGMs, and SAMs at us if we get too close. So I think the key to success here is going to be to keep the range open. I have a series of phase lines set up as waypoints down here in the TSD, and we're going to use those basically to keep the enemy at arm's length. Now, one thing which is going to make that slightly more complex for us is the terrain. As you can see around here, this is the NTC, so it's mostly empty desert, but it's not flat desert. So there's quite a lot of terrain that OPFOR can take advantage of. I would fully expect them to go sitting behind hills on reverse slopes, both to ambush our ground forces and make it more difficult for us to observe them from the air without having to get uncomfortably close. And the consequence of that is probably going to be that it's going to force us up high where we're in more danger from their SAMs. So there's a bit of risk management going on here, and really, again, I think the key to that is going to be to keep the range open. So we'll just have to see how that shakes out when we get there. We are closing in on waypoint 1, which I put in more or less as a jumping off point for the mission. So I'm actually going to pop in waypoint 2 and put us into attack phase. Now waypoint 2, or phase line alpha, is the easternmost point that is under direct observation by friendly ground forces. So we expect the enemy to be anywhere beyond that. So I'm going to set myself up in a position well back. And I'm actually going to pop up now to a somewhat higher altitude and just do a little bit of surveillance on that point whilst we're likely to be out of range of any return fire. Basically take the risks early if we possibly can. So I'll just come back. Maybe not quite into a hover, but get nice and slow so that we're not really closing with the enemy at any serious rate. And the Mark I human eyeball is always a helpful tool in this. There is our Stryker unit down there. They'll be stepping off shortly, probably once we get a little bit closer. Okay, airspeed's come back nicely. Get Hellfires up.
Hellfire.
Georgie boy, what do you see down there?
And slaved. Empty slaved.
Ground. Okay, let's see if we can be a bit more specific than that. I'll duplicate the TADs on our display here. Yeah, I can't see very much. Alright, well, we'll start to close in a little bit and see if we can positively identify whatever it is he's seen down there. Presumably he'd be able to identify the Strykers. In fact, he hasn't even called those out, so I guess it's just assumed that they're irrelevant to us, insofar as we're not going to shoot them, obviously. But that is pretty much just past phase line alpha.
Cowboy 1-1 stepping off.
Alright, and the Strykers are stepping off. So we will need to make sure we deconflict and we don't shoot them. Really speaking, George is fairly good at identifying friend from foe, which is helpful. Ground. I'm just going to have him check that exact same spot again and see if that produces different routes. Oh, hello. Okay, yeah, zoomed in like that.
Laser on.
Yeah, that's a BRDM. That's likely to be OPFOR's regimental reconnaissance out in a screening position. And we really shouldn't get any closer than this, actually. We'll come back to a hover now. Okay, well, that's been positively identified. We're going to take it out. Fire.
Engaging.
And I can see some vehicles behind it as well. So it looks like the enemy have got a screening position set up at the top of the pass, possibly on a very slight reverse slope from what I can see from here. So we'll deal with that from nice long range.
Lasers off. Those are good hits.
Alright, what else do you see down there? We'll actually get a bit lower. Okay, we've got a tank.
Blazing.
Looks like we've basically got a BMP platoon with a tank attached down there. Whoops.
Aircraft safe.
I didn't mean to do that.
Aircraft's armed.
Reacquire that tank for me, please. There we
Laser
go.
on. Roger, engaging.
And shoot. And I'm going to come right back to a hover because I'm already closer than I want to be. I might actually peel off and reset once we've hit this target. Because we're sort of creeping into ATGM range here, and I don't want to do that.
Lasers off.
Yeah.
Target destroyed.
That target's down. I'm going to move back a bit just to keep that range open. Following my own advice. Phew. And ignore that sudden change in the lighting. It's just the weather engine having a moment. And we'll get back to where we're about 7 kilometers from phase line alpha. That should be good to keep the range open. Actually, probably 6 will be enough, because that platoon we saw behind it is a little further away. Okay, now reset. Come around, and this might be where my flying gets just a little bit slovenly. Hover symbology, please. And... Oh, yeah. George, what do you see? Actually, that's a bit useless.
Empty slaved.
There we go. Okay, Strykers are in sight, and those BMPs are in sight.
Blazing.
That'll do. Shoot.
Engaging.
I'm right back into a hover. I don't want to be moving any further forward. I don't mind if we climb a bit, though, just to... Whoops.
Roger, engaging.
Was that our missile landing short?
Engaging.
Maybe not.
Firing.
Yeah, usually he won't shoot if we've still got a missile in the air. I'll give that another few seconds then.
Lasers off.
Oh, okay,
Target
so we
destroyed.
did hit it. That explosion must have been something else then. Possibly them engaging our strikers, depending how far forward they move.
Laser on.
Okay, we got another
Engaging.
BMP in that position. Engage. And, okay, make sure we're not losing altitude here. I don't mind climbing a bit. We should be far enough back. I don't even mind if we backslide slightly. Ooh. Now that might be something that missed. Maybe? What happens if I ask him to shoot again? Yeah, that missile missed. Okay. Sometimes it just happens, especially in complex terrain, that George just misses targets. That might be a bug, might be a feature. Good lord. I could see how micro-terrain could interfere with the laser, things like that, so... And we're sliding right slightly, so we'll try to counteract that. Was that another missile missing? Oh, that's why they call it a missile. Okay, let's try another target for now. BMP, is there another one that's still down there? Yes, engage.
Engaging.
Cowboy 1-1 passing phase line Alpha.
Looked like from what I saw there that some of our strikers are basically just on the opposite side of the hill from it now, so yeah, we're basically clearing out a reverse slope ambush here. Yeah. And they're reporting passing phase line Alpha, so got to be really careful to watch our fire here.
Lasers off.
There we go.
Those are good hits.
And there was that last BMP that was still down there in that position. Yeah.
Blazing.
I think everything else is further away. Alright, let's make sure we actually hit this bloody thing. Fire!
Engaging.
I'm gonna actually slide left a little bit to get a better angle on it. I think we've shot most of our Hellfires at this point. Once we are able to locate the enemy's main line of resistance, I will throw any remaining Hellfires we have at it, but really, once we've broken through the screen, that's our mission. Pretty much.
Lasers
complete.
off. Good effects. Good effects.
Good effect indeed. So yeah, do you see anything else in that position there, George, or is everything? Yeah. Looks like everything else is basically on the counter slope further away. That's likely to be the enemy's main line of resistance.
This is Cowboy 1-1. Enemy screen has been attrited. I have eyes on several armored vehicles on the counter slope 5 kilometers to the east. We have located the main line of resistance.
And that is indeed what our Stryker force is reporting. How many Hellfires do I have left? Is it like 1? Probably. Okay. Well, we'll prioritize targets in that case. Enemy tanks are definitely at the top of that list, so
Blazing.
I'll throw a Hellfire at that T-72 over there, provided we're in range. We're really high. I'm starting to feel kind of vulnerable here. Yeah, that's not in range. Okay, well, I'm going to get low if we're going to get any closer. I almost like the idea of hiding behind that ridgeline just in front of us there if we have to get that much closer, but we'll see. It's nice to create a position where you're basically, I mean, honestly, fighting in a helicopter almost has as much in common with fighting as a ground force as it does an air component. It can be helpful to create a little cheeky keyhole position to shoot through like that to minimize your risk from return fire, that sort of thing.
In range. Ready to launch.
Okay, I don't think we have to get any closer than that. probably not very range now. So I will just come back into a hover, and we'll just line up and shoot. And I don't mind, getting lower as long as we don't get into a VRS condition. I'm dropping too fast, so... Alright, let him have it. Stabilize while the missile's in flight. And we'll see if that was our last missile or not. I wasn't keeping count of how many we shot, but we had a couple miss, and we were carrying 8. And we had 5 targets, so... That was either the last one or the second last one.
Lasers off. Good effects, good effects.
And does he DWAS now? He does not. Okay.
DWASD.
Oh, yes he did, so we don't have any more. Ooh, Strela 10, Mobile Sam. Okay, that would have been a great target for another Hellfire if we'd known about it at the time, but given how prickly this enemy force is, I'm not willing to close in enough to use rockets and the cannon on it. So we're going to consider that to be our mission complete. And so far as the reconnaissance is done, we've located the main line of resistance, and now it's someone else's job to go in and actually attack it. Or indeed push additional helicopters forward to attrite it. Now, if I'd had a wingman, or more than one, we probably actually could have done quite a lot more damage than we did. And when I originally made this mission, I did plan to have one, but I encountered a bug where they just basically lifted off into a hover check above the helipad and didn't like get information and follow me to the objective or anything. So if anyone knows how to fix that, I'm all ears. Normally, as long-time viewers will attest to, I tend to complain quite a lot about DCS wingmen, but the behavior of the AI Apaches is at least semi-intelligent. They don't just, like, charge in and close with the enemy for no reason. They will sort of sit back at standoff range to launch their missiles, so I would have been reasonably confident in its ability to survive, even in a fairly high-threat scenario like this, but, yeah. Didn't shake out this way, so I ended up flying this one as a singleton, which, as I understand, doctrinally is kinda rare, but is what it is. I did try to imbue the scenario with at least some realism. In any case, we are going to return to ZFARP. And home sweet temporary home down there is the FARP from which we took off, in which I tried to set up to make it look at least vaguely realistic compared to the default scenery object. And we're going to try and, well, I am going to try and land at it without embarrassing myself. We'll see how that goes. And if, well, to that end, I should really be decelerating a little earlier, probably. No point in making a sort of high-performance handbrake turn combat landing. The aircraft is really not going to handle that very well, and neither is the pilot, so we're going to be very gentle. And we'll come around and land facing in the direction we took off in. I don't think there's any real appreciable wind. I didn't even put a windsock down there. Oops. But I don't think that'll be too much of a problem. Alright, back into hover symbology. But frankly, for the most part, when I'm landing, I try to ignore the HUD for the most part. And just focus on looking out the window at sort of near and far reference points. I find that's much more helpful. And frankly, the symbology of the HUD sort of incentivizes you to chase it, which you probably shouldn't do. Like this pokey outy stick symbology. I'm sure it has a proper name. I do find helpful for hovering at high altitude, like we were doing earlier in the mission, but very much secondary in takeoff and landing. Something like this. And certainly not something we want to be relying on. Okay, don't slide right too much. Oh boy, this is where it gets messy. Alright, just stabilize before we touch down so that we don't flip over. Drifting, drifting, drifting. Oh, this isn't going to be my finest hour, I don't think. Set her down as gently as possible. Brakes. Yeah, put the parking brake back on. Anyway, that has been the mission. It seems to have gone fairly successfully. My plan to mitigate the threat worked pretty well. We, in the end, didn't take any return fire, near as I can tell. And we destroyed what appeared to be an enemy observation post established by the regimental reconnaissance and what was probably a combat reconnaissance patrol pushed forward from one of their maneuver battalions. And we located the enemy's main line of resistance, which will enable a follow-on attack. I hope the video has been at least vaguely interesting to watch. I absolutely intend to feature this aircraft again in the future, so I'm quite open to input as to what form that will take. And that'll be about it. To-dos.